Scharnhorst was Germany's first serious attempt to build a warship capable of challenging the naval supremacy of the British and French battlecruisers. Its construction, however, was constrained by the Washington Naval Treaty, which limited the size, weight, and armament of new ships. As a result, although Scharnhorst was a formidable vessel in many respects, it was significantly underarmed for its size. Its main battery consisted of 9 11-inch guns arranged in 3 triple turrets, supported by a dozen 5.9-inch guns. Work on the ship began in June 1935, and it was completed in October 1939, just weeks after the outbreak of the Second World War. From the beginning, Scharnhorst usually operated alongside its sister ship, Nisa. The two became known for their daring raids, often working with smaller pocket battleships to disrupt Allied convoys that carried vital supplies to the Soviet Union. During their campaigns in the Atlantic and Northern waters, they sank a number of British merchant vessels, striking fear into Allied shipping. This success, however, drew the full attention of the Royal Navy, which began an intense effort to track them down. Scharnhorst, despite being outgunned compared to Britain's largest battleships, was not easily defeated. It would ultimately take more than 14 heavily armed British warships to bring her down in December 1943, during the Battle of the North Cape. That engagement would prove to be the final clash between British and German capital ships and one of the last great battleship duels of the war. The story of Scharnhorst's creation began after Germany's defeat in the First World War. The Treaty of Versailles imposed strict limitations on the German military. The army was reduced to 100,000 men, far too few to defend the nation, and the navy, the Kriegsmarine, was particularly crippled. Germany was forbidden from building dreadnoughts, the powerful battleships that had dominated the Great War. Instead, it was permitted only to keep or modernize older pre-dreadnought vessels of no more than 10,000 tons, roughly equivalent to a British heavy cruiser. This left Germany virtually defenseless against the fleets of its former enemies. Despite these restrictions, German engineers sought ways to rebuild naval strength. They introduced the so-called pocket battleships, displacing around 12,000 tons, and armed with 6 11-inch guns in 2 triple turrets. These ships were designed not as frontline units, but as commerce raiders, fast enough to escape most enemy cruisers and strong enough to destroy them in combat. For a time, they offered Germany a creative means of projecting power at sea, but their usefulness was limited. Britain and France possessed fast battleships that could both catch and outgun these smaller vessels, leaving them vulnerable in a major confrontation. It soon became clear that Germany would need larger and more powerful warships if it hoped to compete with its rivals. When Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, the rearmament of Germany was already quietly underway, but he expanded it dramatically. Hitler's vision for Germany was to restore its military might and transform the nation into a global superpower. He encouraged all branches of industry to support the military buildup, offering lucrative contracts, and he pressed the Kriegsmarine to grow into a force capable of challenging Britain's dominance at sea. In 1935, the Anglo-German Naval Agreement gave Germany official permission to construct larger ships, a concession from Britain that reflected the global naval arms race of the time. Japan, Britain, and the United States were all building new and more powerful warships, and Germany was eager to join them. That same year, construction began on 2 new capital ships, Scharnhorst and Nisa. They were named both in honor of German cruisers destroyed by the Royal Navy off the Falkland Islands in 1914 and after 2 Prussian generals remembered as key figures in building the Prussian army during the Napoleonic Wars. Scharnhorst was launched in October 1936 at Wilhelmshaven and officially completed in January 1939. Just months before Germany invaded Poland and the world was plunged into war. The new ship displaced 32,100 tons when empty, and up to 38,000 tons when fully loaded. Measuring 235 meters in length, with a beam of 30 meters, and a draft of almost 10 meters. It was one of the largest ships Germany had built since the First World War. Its engines were 3 Brown Bovary-geared steam turbines, producing over 158,000 horsepower, which gave it an impressive top speed of 58 kilometers per hour and allowed it to cruise for 16,000 kilometers without refueling. The ship's armor was thick and carefully designed. The main belt reached 350 millimeters. The armored deck varied from 40 to 105 millimeters, and the turrets were protected by up to 360 millimeters of armor on the front. The ship's main battery of 9 11-inch guns was lighter than the 14-inch and 15-inch guns carried by the battleships of other navies. German engineers had deliberately sacrificed firepower for speed and armor protection. Hitler himself approved the choice of the smaller guns, arguing that it would avoid provoking Britain and France to directly hit. Promised that would later be refitted with larger 15-inch guns, but this never came to pass. Alongside its main guns, Scharnhorst carried 12 5.9-inch secondary guns and an array of anti-aircraft weapons, including 14 Flak 38s and 16 SKC-30s. Its crew numbered nearly 2,000, including around 60 officers. By November 1939, after final modifications, Scharnhorst was ready for combat. Its first mission came on November 21, 1939, when it joined Gneisenau 9 destroyers and the light cruiser Cantel to draw British warships away from the pocket battleship. Admiral Grafspee. During this operation, Scharnhorst sank the British armed merchant cruiser Rawalpindi. In early 1940, during the Norwegian campaign, Scharnhorst had a brief encounter with the battlecruiser Renown, which escaped, but in June of that year, it intercepted and sank the aircraft carrier Glorious along with its escorts. In 1941, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau embarked on a bold raiding mission that wreaked havoc on Allied shipping before returning to the captured French port of Brest. From there, they were intended to act as a diversion to allow the new battleship Bismarck to slip into the Atlantic. However, constant Royal Air Force attacks disrupted their operations, and Bismarck's mission ended in disaster. Eventually, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau withdrew to Germany, and Scharnhorst spent most of 1942 undergoing repairs in Kiel. In 1943, the ship redeployed to Norway to strike at convoys carrying supplies to the Soviet Union. Working in tandem with U-boats, Scharnhorst contributed to severe disruptions of Allied logistics. On December 24 of that year, it sailed once again to attack a British convoy, unaware that its movements had been detected. The Royal Navy assembled a powerful force to intercept it. One group, under Admiral Robert Burnett, consisted of the cruisers Belfast, Norfolk, and Sheffield. Another, under Admiral Bruce Fraser, included the battleship Duke of York, the cruiser Jamaica, and 4 destroyers. On December 26, as Scharnhorst approached Bear Island to strike the convoy, the British were waiting in ambush. Admiral Eric Bay, commanding Scharnhorst, ordered his crew to battle stations as the cruisers closed in. Belfast struck first, damaging the German ship's radar. Norfolk fired next, but inflicted little harm. Scharnhorst returned fire, scoring hits on Norfolk and disabling its gunnery radar and a turret. Then attempted to escape at full speed, but the British ships pursued relentlessly. The Duke of York soon entered the battle, opening fire from 11 kilometers away. Its 14-inch shells inflicted heavy damage, knocking out one of Scharnhorst's turrets and forcing the crew to flood ammunition magazines to prevent explosions. One by one, Scharnhorst's turrets were disabled under the British bombardment. Casualties mounted as shells from Duke of York smashed secondary guns and tore into the ship's armored hull. Despite this, the German sailors fought on with grim determination, continuing to fire their 11-inch guns, even as they were overwhelmed. The battle raged for hours. Eventually, shells from Duke of York penetrated Scharnhorst's boiler rooms. Reducing its speed, British destroyers Scorpion and Stord moved in and launched torpedoes, 4 of which struck home. Their hits crippled the ship, disabling a propeller shaft, jamming a turret, and causing flooding. As Scharnhorst slowed further, Belfast and Jamaica closed in and launched more torpedoes. The great ship, battered by shellfire and torpedoes, began to sink by the bow. Only scattered shots from its secondary guns continued as it slipped beneath the waves. Seen by the British as a final act of defiance when the firing finally ceased, British searchlights swept the water for survivors. Out of nearly 2,000 men aboard, only 36 were rescued. The rest perished in the freezing Arctic waters. Distressing cries still came from the darkness. But the British ships, under orders, eventually withdrew. The sinking of Scharnhorst secured the Arctic convoy routes for the Allies, allowing supplies to flow more safely to the Soviet Union. For Britain, it was a significant victory that freed its capital ships for use elsewhere. For Germany, the loss was catastrophic. The surface fleet of the Kriegsmarine would never recover, and from then on, its role in the war was reduced almost entirely to U-boat